Welcome to the first episode of BoobTube Babble. We are going to start with a show that's actually been on for a while, but it's lots of things to talk about, and it is The Handmaid's Tale. My name is Joy.
Hi, my name is Mindi, and I'm one of the older members of the Feminerd Files group, and I was a teacher librarian.
I'm Lauren. I also am a librarian. I am probably one of the younger people in the group, and I've read the book. I'm caught up on the TV show, and I saw the 1990 movie.
Blessed be the fruit. Let's get started.
Blessed be the fruit.
All right, so maybe we should start a little bit with the background of the book before we talk about the TV show.
Okay. Well, The Handmaid's Tale is a book that has haunted me since I read it in 1985. I was about 25 years old, had just graduated from college, was living in a big city. I had big hair and big shoulder pads. I thought it was pretty cool that I had a job where I could be self-sufficient and take care of myself. The women's movement had made a big stir a few years before, and while I wasn't a part of that, I recognized the strides for women. The difference is in 1985, you had to be kind of quiet about that. I remember working and trying to look good and professional, but not too masculine was very important. I had a pink silk bow tie thing that I wore with my power suit so that I would not look too mannish. When I read The Handmaid's Tale, it had been a big deal. It was like a small wave. It was something that friends told me about before I ever read anything about it. And not long after, somebody told me, you really should read this book. It was starting to there was a lot of noise that we need to ban this book. So immediately I bought it, read it, and I was appalled. And part of the deal was reading it, I could see so much of my life, my upbringing, and the potential that this kind of dystopian future could happen.
Yeah. So 1985, I was 12, so I did not read this book. And when the movie came out in the 90s, like 1990, I was still in high school, so I also did not see that because I was brought up in Kansas, God-fearing town. So I really didn't have any background of this story. I knew the story, just, people talk about the story, reference the story anytime bad things happen to women, like in Afghanistan. So I really didn't know how this went until this show came out last year. It is a haunting, recognizable story. I think that's what's scary about it. You see it all as a possibility of our reality in this country, and definitely a reality in other countries. And this was after the most recent election that it came out, right?
Yeah, April of last year, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the Women's March had happened, and there was a lot of talk about women's health care, funds being cut for that, and of course, abortion is a big part of the discussion. I would say that this show has enhanced the conversation since January of 2017.
I'm curious, when this book came out and I read it, I don't remember having any kind of a worldview. There was no internet. There was, I'd read the newspaper and believe everything that was there. And I didn't have a big idea of what was happening around the world anywhere. I also had a skewed idea from public school as to what our own history was in this country. What I did see is that women had made some strides and there were still a lot of problems. It kind of set off my idea. It was the beginning of my learning about feminism. It was also the beginning of my learning to be an activist. So I am curious how somebody who you've come to this at this point in time in the last few years, how does that hit you? I mean, can you talk about what that was just personally for you?
So I read the book last June. It was the first time I had read it. It had been in my TBR pile, as librarians like to say, which is to be read pile for years, and I'd kind of just put it off. And I read it when I was on vacation, right after I got my master's. So I was in a weird frame of mind. I was saying earlier, I kind of feel like something was robbed of me because I read it 6 months into the Trump administration. So I'd already seen like the protests with the red dresses and the bonnets and that kind of thing. And I was born in 1988. So I was born after The Handmaid's Tale was published. And so it's always been in the world that I've been in. So I grew up, I feel like I can see like threads of Gilead in a lot of places. And along with Handmaid's Tale, I read 2 other books, and they were a part of my graduate program, and I read The Color Purple and I read Persepolis. And so these are all stories where, women are not able to read or not able to act the way that they want to. And I always had a really acute sense of things that could be taken away from me at any time. I grew up in a suburb with a lot of religious people, and I always kind of felt like they were like guerrilla fighters that were out to take my soul. There was a boy that I had a crush on, and we were doing calculus homework in my parents' dining room, and he tried to get me to read the Bible by saying the book of Ecclesiastes was pretty cool. So I always felt like that kind of takeover could happen, especially like in the Bush years, there were like very defined ideas of like this performative patriotic fealty. And that was when I was in high school, so I kind of had a sense of myself, but I was too young to vote. And so I remember like as these kind of social issues were tangled up in like the religious dogma of the government, like feeling just complete dread that, people would come for me, even though like I'm straight, I'm white, I'm not religious, but that's really like the only thing that, could really be taken away from me. So
You're not a gender traitor?
I am not a gender traitor.
So this TV show starts with Offred. If you've not seen it, it's about Offred, whose name stems from Fred. Fred is the commander, and he is basically slave owner. I mean, so the handmaids are women who, they call them women who are criminals and who are also able to have babies, are turned into handmaids. I believe if you are a member of the Gilead upper crust and not a criminal in their eyes, you do not become a handmaid if you are fertile. But
they're already married too. They're the wives.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
And they're married.
yeah, they are the-
and she is a criminal because she's an adulteress, because she was the second wife of her husband.
And they got together when he was still married.
And yes.
But the
So-
reason, I'm sorry.
and
The
that
reason
was-
they wanted her was because she already had a child.
Yes, she had a child who she has been separated from. And so Offred, who we also learn her real name is June, which was not necessarily clear in the book. She's a voice of resistance. She is a handmaid, and she goes through these motions to survive, but we get to hear her in inner dialogue for the show, and we get to see how she resists in her own way against this nightmare of a life that she lives.
Margaret Atwood had said that it was Elizabeth Moss I was reading, who plays Offred, was having a conversation, and I read it, and they were talking about the whole thing about in the book, you don't know June's name until the end of the book. Her lover, I guess, at the time, says it as they're putting her into the truck. Basically, she's getting taken away by the eye. Mm-hmm. And he says her name, and that's the only time in the book they say her name, which was pretty pointed. You take away your name, that you cannot have a sense of self. Mm-hmm. So they're going to take everything, including your name.
Well, and she guards her name very carefully in the book. There was a passage that I just found. I'm rereading it now, and I'm about halfway through it. And she kind of almost doesn't want to deal with it. So what's interesting in the book is we get this totally different Offred. There's a passage that I'm going to read here where Offred is just by herself. She spends a lot of time just kind of sitting around in her room in the book. And she says, my name isn't Offred. I have another name, which nobody uses now because it's forbidden. I tell myself it doesn't matter. Your name is like your telephone number, useful only to others. But what I tell myself is wrong. It does matter. I keep the knowledge of this name like something hidden, some treasure I'll come back to dig up one day. I think of this name as buried. This name has an aura around it, like an amulet, some charm that survived from an unimaginably distant past. I lie in my single bed at night with my eyes closed, and the name floats there before my eyes, not within reach, shining in the dark. Whereas at the end of the first episode, she kind of has this moment where she's like, no, my name is June, and I intend to survive. And later in the second season, she even throws it in Aunt Lydia's face. She's like, if you address me as Offred, I'm not going to respond to you because my name is June.
Yeah, in the second season, they've really Offred and June have sort of separated. Mm-hmm. She kept June hidden more in the first season, and now she's made this sort of conscious effort to have these two different personas. That one is June, who is the strong and who is strong and who is free, and then there's Offred, who's surviving, doing what she has to do to survive. And then the not this past episode, but the episode before it is when she has a complete dissociative breakdown and just goes full on Offred. And she's just compliant and pleasant and nothing's wrong and everything's cool until she finally connects with her own unborn baby at the end. And then she's like, fuck this.
And it's interesting that as she's Offred, she's like hemorrhaging also.
Yes, she is completely, she's dying as Offred because I think she just, at that point, I think she just finds that she can't live with this life anymore because she feels guilty about people who have died and suffered because of the resistance and because of her escape. And Aunt Lydia is just torturing her with that and is blaming June. June did this to you. Offred would never commit these sins. And so she goes full Offred and almost dies. And then she realizes that, June is going to save her, not Offred.
That is what I noticed that I thought was just spot on and horrible, because when you're having some kind of a revolution like that, when you're in the midst of battling, you have to have a strong sense of self. And one of the ways that they're chipping away at her was, of course, her name, the loss of her name. And then Aunt Lydia was telling just mental torture. What's the name? Brainwashing. It felt, as I was watching it, it was like brainwashing because June is already having a breakdown of all that has happened, feeling guilty, all of that stuff. And then Aunt Lydia just kept saying, June is the evil one who did this. It was June. Offred has a chance. Offred can save her baby, etc. And it made me think of all the different ways people are tortured around the world. And again, takes me back to, in my own life, that most of my friends out of college became Mrs. Somebody. And they lost their names. It's an interesting thing. That is sort of a loss of identity that we support and we go celebrate. And it's yet again one of those little patriarchal things that we have seen down through history. And if you go back to my grandmother's time, as I tell my friends here, and we laugh about it, my grandmother would never say her first name. She always said, I am Mrs. Kirk Clary, and nice to meet you. You may call me Thelma, but that was her biggest thing. Yes, I agree. It is disgusting. However, it was a thing. She did not have an identity of herself that was beyond that of being her husband's wife.
And they use that in the show, too. It's always, yes, Mrs. Waterford.
Yes.
It's not even, yes, ma'am. So it's
true.
I am of your husband, and you are the legitimate relation to him. And it serves a practical purpose, like the rotating Glenns. I mean, we've lost another Glenn at the end of this recent episode.
Yes. Yeah, there's going to be a new one next week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or this week.
Yeah.
So,
you also see how the women, you also see how it's not just the handmaids that are being tortured. It's not just the handmaids that are living a life they don't want to live. It's as they're showing more of the wives, they're severely restricted. They are expected to have a maternal instinct about their babies that the handmaids have had. They have so much pent-up anger.
They're not allowed to read.
They're not allowed to do anything. They're not allowed to do...
They can't have jobs.
They can't, no. And they can't be... Whereas in their same generation, they had, many of these women had, success or achievement on their own that they could be proud of. And all of this is taken away. And part of that is they're removing their name.
So Moira is an interesting character.
Yes.
Is she a lesbian in the book?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
is she? Okay.
Is. Yeah.
Because, the
Gender
first
traitor.
Offglen is a lesbian. Moira is a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all that representation.
Yeah,
Ha-ha.
so
Two
being
in the
a-
same show.
In the
And
two,
they're
in
both
and two in the
tortured
show.
hideously.
I know. But Moira, she's kind of this, we see her journey go a little faster, where she is the fighter and escapes and then comes back, and then she is becomes a Jezebel, and then sort of loses her light and feels like fighting is no longer worth it, and that she's reserved, and she's just ready. This is who she's gonna be, until June confronts her, and she's like, no, you're gonna fight, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna get out of this together, and we're gonna keep this promise to each other to be true to ourselves and to each other. And then Moira breaks free, and she actually makes it out. I don't know if does that happen in the book, but I cried so hard.
I can't remember. I
she
know
made
she
it
runs
out.
into her at Jezebel's, and that's Moira's
That's
made
as far
the
as I
choice.
remember is that, yeah, Moira got to make that choice. She was young and beautiful. And what was funny in the book that they didn't really show on the show was that Moira is dressed like a handmaiden with a little short skirt and stuff as a Jezebel. And June, is surprised at that. And she said, oh, yeah, the number one that they all want, because they all want to come and have sex with their handmaiden, where it's not with the wife there and all that. That's the number one costume to wear. I know. It's so gross. You just want to take a shower.
Well, and it's funny because in the show, Moira is kind of like, this was my choice, but her alternative was go to the colonies, which never appear in the book. So it's really interesting that the second season is kind of showing us
Yeah, the
what
colonies.
kind of goes on there.
Which I am loving the colony stuff, the scenes in the colonies, because it's it's sort of like a concentration camp. It's a work
Exactly.
camp, and these women have they actually get to bond with each other. They get to talk. Of course, there's restrictions, and they're slaves still, but they get to have more community in the colonies, because they're not living for very long.
Yeah.
And they're always together.
They're
in
always- yeah.
The handmaid life is very solitary, which is one thing that makes the book kind of really tough. I think not tough, but like you're so much in Offred's head, and she just totally
Yes.
lacks community. And it's really hard. Like, I guess they watch the news. Like, I had forgotten. There's TV news that they watch, and they're, of course, Offred's wondering if what they're being shown is true. And I'm like, haha,
fake news.
Fake news.
Fake
Yeah. But they do get some kind of semblance of what's happening outside, but everything's kind of through whispers, and one day your shopping partner escapes. Or not escapes, or escapes, or is
Disappears.
executed, or doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't show up for shopping, and you don't know where they are or who they were even.
So one thing that bothers me about this Gilead is the lack of white supremacy that I expect in this kind of a society. For me, the oppression of women and the oppression of gay people, and the extreme misogyny and religious overtones, and generally go hand in hand with white supremacy, at least in this country. So because this is supposed to be formerly the United States, I expected to see more of that. And we do see that in the movie, and it is in the book. So I'm disappointed, actually, that they're not touching on that, especially with the current events. They're missing. I think they're missing an opportunity there. It is more inclusive because we have more Black actors in the show and characters who are beloved. But I think they missed an opportunity for this conversation. And maybe they just thought it's just too much to do all these different things that are awful that happen at the same time.
Well, I feel like they kind of just want it to like squeak by because there are no like Black wives either. Like the
Yes,
ruling class
exactly.
is all white. The people who we don't really get we haven't gotten a clear story yet, but I think from what I understand, Congress was attacked. So all three government branches were attacked. Like Congress and the White House and the Supreme Court, I think, were all kind of blown up in some kind of terrorist action. And this religious zealot group, the Sons of Jacob, took over and established Gilead. And in that, I'm kind of wondering, like they keep talking about in the flashbacks about birth rates declining. And I kind of wish somebody would just say like, well, like, any kicking baby's a good baby or something.
Yeah. I mean, June's baby is biracial and is placed in a family.
And Moira was a handmaid.
And Moira is white in the movie, Elizabeth McGovern.
Yeah.
So they missed an opportunity because, I mean, we're reading, this is current events. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing this blatant racism and sexism that sort of go hand in hand. The abuse of power and authority that's happening now is very parallel.
Yeah. It's always predicated on creating a hierarchy.
And a better society. Better society, a little bit whiter society.
As the commander says, though, better is not better for everyone.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I do like in the show how they showed a few episodes in what June's life was like. We got a really good, clear picture of how this happened. I do remember reading the book, and I can't remember if they talk about how it happened as much. I just remember being horrified by the whole thing. But I really enjoyed that they did that because, again, it's terrifying when we have such low voter turnout in our country, and then we end up with all of these policy changes and crazy stuff that people are trying to pass laws that take away rights we already have, rights that we have fought for.
Yeah, no terrorist is blowing anything up.
No
terrorist. They're just subtly going, oh, well.
So this is how it starts, is that kind of stuff. It starts with the fascism of fake news and making people question everything, whatever. And then the feeling of so many of us like, oh, but that's okay, we'll be okay. And the women, I have a really good job until the day they're fired. And then their bank accounts are frozen. And the interesting thing in the show that I thought was very telling is that June has a lovely husband. He is a modern man. He is supportive. He's co-parenting, really well, all of this stuff. He is that guy that you want her to have. And he made one comment. So when the two women found out that their bank accounts had been frozen and you had to have a husband or a family member access that money for you, his comment was, I'll never let anything happen to you guys. I'll take, it's something along that line.
Yeah,
I'll take care of that for you guys, as opposed to being outraged that occurred. And it's part of that being so passive that this is crazy. This isn't going to last. Somebody will do something.
Well, and also just
and
the view that, don't you worry, I'll just take care of you because I'm a man and I still have all the rights.
Right. That's
you don't have to worry.
I'll share some of mine.
I'll make sure that you're happy.
You don't have to worry. And
you
how
don't have
easily
to make yourself
then
happy.
Yeah. So how easily this modern man that I really like is sucked into that level he's saying
still a little bit part of the problem.
Part
just
of it.
A little bit.
And they don't run until it's seriously dangerous.
So the second season, they do even more flashbacks to some of the protests. And one thing that they talk about, which I don't know is in the book, is that June's mother is a doctor. She's kind of a hippie, possibly a lesbian or lesbian adjacent, and she's an abortion doctor.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, that's what I
Yeah.
got. Did you get that?
I don't
got
remember
that. Yeah.
in the show.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So she was,
And I don't know that actor's name, but she's wonderful.
so wonderful. And there was the whole episode about the relationship with her mother. It's right before she gets caught. She's dealing with the relationship with her mother and the relationship as a mother with her daughter that she is leaving behind. And the thing that she talks about is that her mother saw this coming and took it very, very seriously. And June, just was like, whatever, Mom, you're crazy and your friends are kind of crazy. And I just want this conventional life. I want to just live my life and be happy and kind of just put the blinders on about what's happening. But she says, Mom, you knew. And then, of course, they killed her. And so this episode, she spent some time sort of mourning that missed opportunity to let her mom know that she loved her and she misses her, and she wishes that she had listened more intently.
Sometimes I have felt in the last year in particular, I guess I relate to the mom in so many ways that, my era, once I became a feminist and then I came out, and in the environment that, not only didn't I not tell anybody I was reading The Handmaid's Tale when I was going to work, I used to always read on the bus, I did not take that book with me on the bus because there was so much commentary about it, and I didn't want to be labeled a troublemaker because that's what I was taught. You don't get labeled that. A feminist was not a good thing. A feminist was, I heard it all growing up, a feminist is a ball breaker who can't get along with men, or a feminist is a lesbian, but they would use all of the other horrible words about that.
Well, that's
basically.
how even the cast of this show has done that.
Yeah, they've said this is not a feminist show.
What? Yeah, it's a human show. And one thing that's so there's one moment, if I like The Hill That I Will Die On happens in episode 2 of The Handmaid's Tale, and they are walking by, I don't know if the church has already been torn down, but Emily / Ovglen says to June / Offred, they're taking this church down. And June says, this was my father's parish. My daughter was baptized there, which I thought was so weird because in the book, I don't think the mother is a doctor, but she's like a feminist activist. And when she shows up in the slideshow at the Red Center, that actually does happen in the book. So her mother in the book was declared an unwoman, which are the feminists, and her mother was sent to the colonies.
Oh, so maybe I just interpreted that my own way, that she was an OBGYN and was...
I definitely didn't watch that one a second time, but it happens in the book. Her mother was like a very second wave feminist, so they were she took little baby June to anti-porn demonstrations, and they also they talk about her mother was like, I didn't need you to have a father. So her mother was she was a later age.
Glorious Dynam.
Yeah, she was a 37-year-old single mother, and she was like, all my friends are making fun of me for calling me a pronatalist and all this stuff. Yeah. So I thought it was really weird that the film or that the movie also kind of departed, they took June out of that environment at the same time that they were, kind of talking about how it's not a feminist show.
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
And talking about feminism, there's a couple different kinds of feminism. Do we consider Serena Joy a feminist? I think that's something to explore because she is part of the movement. She's a very powerful part of the movement. She has a big, powerful voice. She's a person of authority. She's clearly very smart, but she's basically oppressing herself and others. But that's her choice to do so. So is she also a feminist?
So I grew up in the era of third wave feminism, where it's kind of you do you feminism, even though people are afraid of using that word still, even people that I think are supposed to be of my generation, like Taylor Swift.
What's wrong with them?
I like Taylor
Swift.
I
don't get that feminism is such a scary thing. Why is that word so horrible now?
And the thing that, so even if Serena Joy is doing her own thing and has this possibly Ivanka Trump-esque empire, of capitalizing on her worldview. And I think she's more like Ivanka Trump than Ann Coulter, even though she's more intellectual, but because she seems like kind of a brand. And her rhetoric didn't seem as hateful, but we didn't get to hear what she had to say that much. But I think that one thing that is important to think about is her work keeping down other women, and she's advocating for a society, and then kind of is complicit in constructing a society that restricts the freedom of women all the time. And we even saw that before. Like June was kind of mom shamed for choosing her career over her daughter when it was at a point where, you know, a cold could kill somebody. So I think that
so that's okay.
So I'm
Serena
not
Joy thing. So she's a feminist, and yet
I think
she's you do you, but she is fighting against women.
Yeah, she's like, I'm doing you too.
So you, me do me, and screw you,
and you do me. My way is the way.
Exactly.
My way or the colony highway.
I'll tell you how to do you, and you must.
I really am enjoying Serena Joy's story. She's terrifying and very sympathetic, and I'm loving it, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I hope that there's some redemption for her, because I'm really pulling for her, because I think she's a really interesting character and a strong character, and I really just don't want her to end up alone, or I don't know. I want her to find happiness that she really, really wants. She's at the college, and she's talking about trying to change the country, and they're sort of heavy environmentalist almost. This Gilead is pretty hardcore about going back to a simpler life that is better for the earth. Can't really argue with some of that,
Exactly.
That's all good stuff, but it's also extremism where they go. And is that a feminist thing?
The extreme groups are always giving you something that is palatable to, and if you followed, for instance, I'll say his name again, Trump. If you followed that whole thing of the whole campaign, how interesting it was that he gave the palatable thing and the wanted thing to every different group he went to, no matter what it was.
No matter what he knew about it.
Somehow, this is what terrified me about him being elected, was that I had read this book when it came out. It has haunted me since. I have fought against all of these things. I've been like June's mother, and I've been volunteered at Planned Parenthood to be part of the barricade so women can go get the health care that they need, whatever that is. Then we go through this in our country, and there was so much lying, so much craziness, but people are so desperate just to hear what they want to hear. And then the rest of us, I don't know. Where was everybody voting? I don't know. So it's a big question, and it's also a thing of how fast this can happen.
Yeah, how fast can this happen?
Exactly.
Really? I mean,
it could.
Afghanistan.
Well,
yes. Exactly.
The thing that the show and the book, one way that they're united in a way that I find the most haunting is that anything can become normal, which is like my core belief. My explanation for anything is Stockholm syndrome. And I really see, and it happens in the show, and the reason it's able to go quickly in part is because women have their ability taken to read. So at some point in the book, like, they're taking all these Bible quotes out of context. At one point, they slip in each according to his ability to each according to his need, which is Marx. And they're like shoving it off as a Bible quote. And there's even a part where Offred says, but who could even check it? So when fact checking has been removed, so when Snopes goes down, like, we're all just done for.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, exactly.
So listen to each other, and join some communities.
Exactly.
Go to
Listen
the
to
marches.
each other if each other are fact checkers. I've actually seen, I've had a couple of friends who I, treasure and have similar thinking with share, internet memes about, one was the American baseball teams took a knee against lynching for the national anthem. That's a hoax. I snoped that. I also snoped Tim Tebow was kneeling for the national anthem because the country still has abortion legalized. That's also just a lie. So it's the palatable thing. It's intoxicating.
We believe it because we want to believe it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we tell ourselves stories in order to live, as Joan Didion.
And we all do it. We all do it for our own reasons. So.
And again, that's nothing new. It truly is nothing new. And one thing that Margaret Atwood said that I think we said earlier is that everything she wrote in the novel has happened. It may not have happened in this country, although a lot of it has. But it has happened at some point and somewhere in the world. And the people who were involved in that, oh my God, the world seemed to change overnight. And again, all you do is try and survive then and keep your family safe. And if you're going in that mode, you know, it's the bad stuff. I can't quote Latin, but she also said, remember, don't let the bastards get you down.
Don't let the bastards get you
Which
down.
is funny because it's not even real Latin. Like they've taken
Oh,
on
really?
the mantle. No, it's fake
did not know.
Latin. They've taken on the mantle of, you know, their rallying cry is actually nonsense, but it means something because they imbue
Right.
it with meaning.
Right.
Interesting.
And I guess by rallying cry, it's really just her one woman rallying cry.
More to come. You know, we're going to talk
to
a little
come.
bit more about it when this show is over, just to sort of wrap it up and wrap up some thoughts, because I don't believe this is going a third season.
It is. It's been renewed already.
Has
It's
it really?
going another season, you guys.
Well,
Yes.
something to remember as well. So as far as the show goes, my commentary on that, I mean, it's beautiful. It's vivid. It brings the really important things to life. And I have a freaky imagination. And they are doing stuff visually that did not even occur to me in this incredibly haunting book.
I'm a
And-
little disturbed they're going to do another season, because I don't know. I want to hang with it because I think it's important stuff. But wow, I don't know if my heart can take it.
I don't want it to lose its punch.
I
to be
don't.
honest.
Yeah.
And one of the best things of the book, which is why I've remembered it for so many years, just has to do with you're kind of left with a cliffhanger, and that's it.
And
Yep.
it's exactly long enough, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So we'll see how that goes. We're going to talk about this again after the end of the season 2. And thanks for listening to our BoobTube babble about The Handmaid's Tale
From
and
the Tower of Babylon.
the Tower of Babylon, Gilead. And under his eye, we will see you.